Jimmy, glad to have you back with us today on the Conservative Command Radio Show.
Good to be with you, Sam.
Jimmy, last time you were with us, I had to look back. It was actually in April of this year, and I thought back, it's amazing how much has happened since April. Hamas, the war with them, the discovery of tunnels into Israel, the rise of ISIS, and a whole lot more. And I'd like to go over some of these things with you and just bear down on what's happening in the Middle East. First of all, let's go this direction if we can. There's a bit of a reprieve here now in this conflict. It was intense for a while with Hamas and Israel. What have you seen to be the primary impact that this conflict so far has had on Israel and its people and its government? Are the people worn out? Are they stronger? Is the government more in confusion, or is the government more consolidated by what has happened thus far with this direct conflict with Hamas?
Well, the people are worn out with the fighting between Hamas and the Israeli Defense Force, but they're somewhat perturbed with the Prime Minister Netanyahu because he had the backing of about 88% of the entire Israeli body politic with the incursion there into the Gaza Strip. But when he made a decision to agree on a ceasefire there in Cairo, Egypt, which was brokered by President al-Sisi there in Egypt, the people really turned against him. There was so much pushback that his popularity dropped down about almost 60 points to in the low 20s as to the latest poll that has been taken. The Israeli body politic wanted the Israeli Defense Force to go ahead, finish the job. They are thankful for what they were able to accomplish. They did not destroy all the tunnels, or should I say, the tunnel reconstruction project is underway after the ceasefire was agreed to by both parties. And they are already, in fact, on my website homepage, prophecytoday.com, I have a video that was produced, and they go down into some of the tunnels they're reconstructing right now. That's the lead story on my 10 most important stories that we carry every day on my website page, the homepage, prophecytoday.com. But the people are just very much concerned that Netanyahu did not go ahead with what they at first said they were going to do. They were going to take care of eliminating the threat of Hamas. They did not do that. Now, when you then look back at what is going on as it relates to Hamas, first of all, they claimed victory, and this was somewhat of a propaganda victory, Sam, because they were able to say to the world, hey, look what mean old Israel is doing, killing all these people. Over 2,000 of the Palestinians were killed, and those were, many of them, collateral damage killings that did take place, but they were on purpose by Hamas because they put the women, the children, the elderly on top of buildings where they were going to be launching rockets into Israel. And when the Israeli Defense Force pilots came in, many of them diverted and did not bomb the locations where there was collateral damage that could be seen. But of course, collateral damage in any war is an absolute. And so what they did, using human shields, the Palestinians, Hamas, won a propaganda war. Now, what they are doing now is following the dictates or the pattern that was put in place by Muhammad some 1,400 years ago. You might remember that the Islamic faith came to power. It had its beginnings in a city called Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Town fathers rose up against Muhammad. They killed and wounded many of his followers, pushed them out of Mecca, and so Muhammad took them over to Medina, not too far away. They there re-strategized, rearmed, and they went back into Medina after signing and agreeing to a ceasefire with the people in Medina, went back into Mecca and killed everybody in the town. Then they started the spread of Islam.
See, now that's interesting, Jimmy. Let me jump in right there and just take another direction. Let's go back to what we talked about. That was going to be one of my next questions. This almost 2-week peace. An Israeli spokesman yesterday, which I think you're probably referring to the article on your website about this, has said that Hamas already is rearming. They are making new rockets, and they are digging more tunnels. So This being the case, you're basically confirming that whole thing. How long do you think that we're going to see before there's going to be a re-engagement by some rockets coming back over from Hamas? Obviously, treaties mean nothing to them.
Well, anybody's guess is as good as mine and or yours, Sam. I don't know how long. They have denied the fact that they're going to return to the war within 2 weeks. I believe they're going to have more time to be able to construct those tunnels that we are talking about that have been confirmed by both the Israeli government and the report I have on my website. But in addition to that, they have to build the infrastructure up again. I mean, the Israeli jet fighter pilots, those F-16s, just demolished much of the infrastructure, homes, buildings, banks, mosques, even some hospitals where they were using human shields, human Palestinian shields, to keep the Israeli Defense Force from striking. So I think it's going to be a bit longer. I have talked to some people with some knowledge. They say it's probably going to be quiet maybe for the next 2 years. Now, we don't know. Hamas could strike at any moment. But they're going to have to spend millions and even billions of dollars to put that reconstruction project in place and take care of getting their infrastructure back in place, Sam.
Okay, and with that, let's go forward into the next piece here. You mentioned, and I was not that aware of the significant drop in popularity of Benjamin Netanyahu. However, this is the question, logically, is why didn't he go further? He's in a tough spot because there is still some semblance of U.S. support, even though there's not that much there, and there was a lot of warning being done. But I want you to, actually, we're going to come back on the other side of the break. Why did not Benjamin Netanyahu go after and do the real total clean-out on Hamas, knowing that the failure to do so was only going to give them time to come back? Was it the fear of the United States threatening, or perhaps was it the threat by Hezbollah and even ISIS that they would enter into the conflict and they would not let Hamas go down? What's your take on that?
Well, I don't believe it was the threat from Hezbollah or ICE either, because of the fact that they're not going to back down from any threat from any enemy of the Jewish state of Israel. What I do believe, though, it was a combination of the pressure put on by the Obama administration. There was a conversation that went on during that 6-week period of time when the Israeli Defense Force was trying to do what they could to destroy at least the operational capabilities of Hamas. And there was a phone call between the White House and President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And boy, there was a screaming match that took place between these two. And Obama just saying that he was going to do all kinds of things as it relates to Israel. You might remember they even considered sending some armament to the people there at the Israeli Defense Force to be able to protect themselves there in the Middle East. So that was a move by the Obama administration. But in addition to that, we started this conversation by talking about the fact that Hamas did get a victory out of this, a PR victory. The world decided to stand with Hamas, the Islamic terror organization, more than they would stand with the Israeli government and how they're protecting their people. I understand the numbers as it relates to people killed during it has nothing to do with reality. But I think Prime Minister Netanyahu looked at the world leaders, their comments being made, what would happen. You see, the Israeli Defense Force, Sam, could go in there and within a couple of weeks be able to destroy Hamas. They did not unleash all the capabilities and powers that they have, and so he backed off, and he felt like that if indeed they could get an agreement for a ceasefire and Hamas would stand down for at least a period of time, sometime, he doesn't know how much, they're watching it very closely, that they might be able to live in that type of an existence. Well, he may have made a political mistake. He may be in a position where he's going to lose the premiership of the state of Israel. We'll have to wait and see on that. The elections could be coming up at any moment, the way the Israeli government operates. But I think it was probably a mistake. Most of his leadership were agreeing with him, agreeing with what I'm saying about that, not with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We're just going to have to wait and see if he made the right decision or not.
Well, that's interesting. Let's move to a larger geopolitical perspective here, Lebanon. Let me bring in Lebanon. Lebanon, up to this point is neutral or in alignment with Israel. At least they're not any kind of an enemy of theirs. They've been a friend all along. But they are being overrun, if nothing else, by refugees out of Syria plus elsewhere, and there is a real threat, as I have been reading, understanding, of the stability of Lebanon. And if Lebanon were to be taken down by the militants or whatever, what does that do to change the makeup and the whole discussion here in the Middle East?
Well, let me just give you this caveat as far as your question is concerned about Lebanon. They are not neutral as such because they are allowing Hezbollah to be in the lower third of modern-day Lebanon. Hezbollah at Israel's northern quarter, you brought up earlier, the threat of Hezbollah. So you got to consider that. But you are right. The Syrian refugees are overrunning Lebanon, but in addition to that, al-Baghdadi has dispatched some of his Islamic State military force to go into Lebanon as well. They're a threat to Lebanon. The possibility of them being overrun by the Islamic State is very viable right now. Islamic State would like to include them. They have a portion of Syria, a portion of Iraq. They're threatening to go into Jordan, and they would certainly like to have a piece of Lebanon, which has got the leaders of Lebanon very much concerned.
Yeah, I imagine that ISIS now, obviously, since April, they came literally, all appearances, nearly out of nowhere. The president referred to them as the JV. Now, all of a sudden, he's going to be talking tomorrow, addressing the people of the country, why we need to go and eliminate them. Now, they've done an awful lot in a short period of time. They're in their viciousness with the decapitations, and all that's taking place is just striking fear into the heart of any person who has any sense at all. It reminds me kind of the Assyrians of old, almost when they went after Israel the way they did. But my question to you is, beyond their arrogant threats to destroy the U.S. and Israel, what else can you share about ISIS that our listeners ought to know? How much of a threat do they now pose to Israel? How much of a threat do they actually pose to the U.S.?
Well, let me just quote our Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey. These two men, in a press conference from the Pentagon, said this is the most dangerous threat that America has ever seen. This is the most awesome terroristic operation any place in the world. They're so well financed, it's unbelievable. When they went into Iraq, went to Mosul, they robbed one of the banks there, got over $400 billion. That's one of the ways they're being financed. And in addition to that, they're able to sell oil even to the European Union. They're selling oil from the oil fields they took over. The Caliph is the Caliphate. Caliph is the spiritual leader of the Caliphate, and this self-imposed leader, al-Baghdadi, he's a great military strategist, number one, but number two, he is one of the most evil men that's ever lived on the face of the earth. You said they've done some decapitations. Well, that is true, but they've killed thousands of people, making them bow down, taking a pistol, putting it to their forehead, and killing them instantly on the spot. And this is continuing almost on a daily basis. And they said within the last 48 hours that they're going to leave the area that they set up as the Caliphate. They're going to include that in it. They're going to go all the way to Jerusalem. They're going to walk into Jerusalem and kill all the barbaric Jews that are there. I have to say, Sam, this is probably the greatest threat that I have ever seen to humankind since I have been living in, especially since in 1972 when I started to teach Bible prophecy. But remember, the book of Revelation, chapter 18, writes pre-written history there when it talks about that will be the situation, not necessarily with an Islamic, but the Antichrist will rule a one-world government, economic, political system from that spot, and this is a precursor for all of that coming together.
Rick Trader, you're listening in right now, too. I know you got a question. You want to have a question for Dr. Young, please?
Yeah, Dr. DeYoung, earlier in the conversation, you were talking with Sam about the collateral damage, and you were also talking about how this was a PR victory for Hamas. And you were also talking about this reprieve, and it seems to me it's more of a reprieve for Hamas than it is for Israel. So, Dr. DeYoung, let's talk for a minute about collateral damage. I believe that collateral damage is an important element in winning a war, and that wars like against Hamas, wars against ISIS will be very difficult to win because these groups think nothing of putting civilians in harm's way.
I agree 100%. They have no respect for human life at all. When you tell children, women, and elderly people to go up on top of a roof so that they can protect the fighters, the Islamic terrorists in the building, from harm's way, you are putting other people's lives totally in danger and with no regard to what should happen to them. And then after that, they start praising them for being Islamic warriors, jihadists, because the Quran teaches that these that are killed in war like this go to the seventh heaven with a special relationship with Allah, the Islamic God. And you can see what's going over there with ICE. You were quoting some of the things that are happening. That's all collateral damage.
Right.
They're telling the United States, quit those airstrikes or we're going to kill another journalist or kill another 200 people or whatever.
Well, Doctor, what I'm getting at is until people in the general public get the idea that you can't win a war without having collateral damage. You know, Doctor, I spent last weekend watching Band of Brothers. Okay, are you familiar with that series?
Yes.
And all through that series, it shows the collateral damage, the civilian casualties. And in my opinion, you can't win a war unless you destroy the public's appeal to support a war.
Well, and I would agree with that statement. Collateral damage is going to be an absolute. Howbeit the Israelis...
Well, then how do you win it? How do you win a war against Hamas with this PR war in Israel because of the collateral damage?
You just have to ignore world opinion. You have to go at the task that you need to go at to save your people, and collateral damage is going to be an absolute. You can pull away from having collateral damage being caused by something you're doing if you can keep from that happening. I got one DVD documentary of the fact that this Israeli Defense Force F-16 flyer was flying over a building, and you know when they strike, it's not the pilot on that aircraft that pulls the trigger. It's somebody on the ground, and he said to the person on the ground, collateral damage, I'm going to go over this target, I'm going to bypass it. That's their heart. But you're right, there is going to be collateral damage. You're never going to get collateral damage up. And one of the pressure points against Hamas has been the collateral damage.
Yes, it has. And, Jimmy, we're about to wrap up the program for today. Thank you, Rick, for the questioning there as well. Jim, we have just 1 minute left. What final one major statement do you want to make here on this issue? And then tell our listeners where to go to follow you more on your website and what you're writing, please.
I've got to say that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is 4,000 years old. It started in the belly of the mother's womb, Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. And the Lord told her there are two states within your womb, and they were going to fight each other for the rest of their lives, their existence.
Wow.
Jacob became Israel, Esau became the Palestinians. I have a documentary on Esau and the Palestinians that shows how that's traced through the Bible and history. It's at my website, prophecytoday.com. Go there to our prophecy bookstore. You can find many other materials that will assist you in understanding what's happening in the world today.
Good. Thank you so much, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung.